You're listening to a Stanislaus Tutoring and Mentoring Program production. The following interview is one in a series of mentoring lectures conducted by the organization's Executive Director, Michael Camara. Future interviewees will include university professors, prominent local business owners and working professionals, and local public servants both currently holding office and candidates running for office. If you'd like to nominate someone you know to be interviewed, please send an email to info@stamptutors.com.
On this cold and blue-skied Tuesday, December 18th, 2012, Stamp welcomes Stanislaus County Superintendent of Schools, Tom Changnon. Mr. Changnon has served as superintendent since 2007. He oversees a staff of 950 and an annual budget of $200 million. The Stanislaus County Office of Education provides instructional and support services to 25 different school districts throughout the county, which are in turn comprised of 190 schools and over 105,000 students. Welcome to this evening's program, Mr. Changnon.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here with you, and I look forward to our conversation.
For tonight's interview, I've generated questions based on feedback provided by local area teachers and administrators. They were invited to share concerns on the topics and issues they would most like addressed during tonight's discussion. And so our question content is representative of their emailed feedback. That said, let's begin with a more personal question. To help orient our listeners, tell us a little bit about yourself. According to the short biography presented on the Stanislaus County Office of Education website, I've learned that you attended Stanford University. You were also drafted by Major League Baseball's Houston Astros as a pitcher, and even worked as a professional baseball scout with the Cincinnati Reds and the Los Angeles Angels. I can't help but think of Brad Pitt's 2011 movie Moneyball. Now, this doesn't sound like a typical professional pathway to a career in educational administration. Can you speak to the unusualness of these life circumstances and how they ultimately contributed to your current status as county superintendent?
Well, I'd be happy to. The short version is I was a country boy raised in Idaho, and I went to a one-room school all the way through 8th grade. The closest high school would have been about a 4-hour bus ride, so my parents moved to California. We ended up in the Bay Area, and I started high school, mind you, coming from a school of 15 to a college prep high school of about 2,000 students. So needless to say, I think I was the person where redneck jokes came from, because I did not fit in very well at all there and struggled mightily until I was actually pulled aside by a teacher who happened to be a coach and kind of got me connected to activities at the high school. And there I was able to make friends through sports. That was my key to success. And then when I was being harassed or teased or bullied, then the friends would say, well, hey, leave him alone, it's okay, he's with us. And that's why I'm always talking to students to get connected somehow to a program or a sport at a school, because it's so vital for their success in their school. So fortunately, I played on some great teams and was able to apply myself academically, and I received a scholarship to Stanford University and continued to play in sports. I focused on baseball at that time and had a great experience at Stanford and was drafted by Houston Astros and played a couple years in their minor league organization, called up my end of my second year, traveled with the big league team for a month when they expand the rosters, and unfortunately never got in a ball game, warmed up a few times, never got in a game, so I don't have any big league stats. But the following year, I was a pitcher. I tell everybody, I used to tell my children all the time I was a flame-throwing fastball pitcher, right? And so I tore all the tendons in my elbow, and back then they didn't have correctable surgery for it. Now they have a surgery procedure called Tommy John surgery. It's really common, but they didn't then, and so it's, well, have a nice life, have a nice career. And so I was kind of struggling with the victim mentality of why did this have to happen to me? I was this close to fame and fortune, as they would say.
Now, this was just 2 years into your baseball career?
Just 2 years into it. So I was, 24 years old, and I went back to my parents' house while I was kind of deciding what my next adventure would be. And a local principal from a high school called. He'd read that I was back in town, that my career had ended abruptly, and he said that there was an opening, that he needed a coach immediately because one of his coaches was injured. And so I said, oh, well, I'll do that. And it was a great experience, being around young people and coaching baseball. And then I started substituting in the classroom, got my teaching credential, and from there it flourished. I moved from the Bay Area, got married, and my wife was a teacher in Modesto. And so I taught for a number of years, went into school administration, did the vice principal, district office, assistant superintendent, and then the position I currently am in is an elected position, and the former county superintendent retired 6 years ago. I ran for that position and won. It's a 4-year term, and then 2 years ago, then I won election again, so I'm in the middle of my second term. So I've enjoyed every stop along my education journey in the profession. It's been wonderful. I have no regrets. Every stop has just been a new high for me. So that's kind of how it ends, or where I am now.
So it was your wife's employment connection to Modesto that originally brought you from the Bay Area to the Central Valley.
Well, she had a job in Modesto. She's ironically a little farm girl herself. Her family grows rice up by Sacramento area. But she had a job at Somerset Middle School in Modesto in the Sylvan School District, and I was ready to leave the Bay Area. When we first married, we both commuted from Livermore, and so I got a job teaching in Modesto, and we've been here ever since, 37 years.
Now, I'm not certain, but with you commuting to Modesto from Livermore, that would have had you traveling on the newly expanded Altamont Pass.
Well, they had just finished that, and it was a luxury back then. That was even before the big rush hour traffic.
Whenever discussing the condition of modern American education as it relates to California, it's virtually impossible to avoid the topics of financial challenge and budgetary stress. With the passing of Governor Jerry Brown's Proposition 30 last November, the K-12 public school system dodged significant budget cuts. Do you see this as enough? Has the system adequately addressed funding problems that could reanimate unpopular money-saving furloughs, increase class size arguments, or shorten academic school year measures?
Well, no, it certainly isn't. In my almost 40 years in education now, I've never seen anything like the last 5 years from an economic position that we've been forced to accept. And it's ironic that when you talk to most people, including politicians, they'll say, what are the two priorities for our state, our great state of California? And they'll say public safety and education. And yet the dollars have not been going there. And so we have been funded historically since the passage of Prop 13 with what they call Prop 98. And this Prop 98 is a guarantee that education will get so much money every year. But because of the economic crisis of the last 5 years, the politicians found a way to manipulate that Prop 98, those guarantees. And they did that in many different little shell games, one of which is their famous deferrals. So we know we owe you this money, but we're going to defer it into the following year. So you just figure out how to make do this year, and then we'll get you some of those payments into the following year. And that's the way the legislators, unfortunately, were able to balance their so-called budget every year in June and then move it forward with all these deferrals. As our economy continued to slide into a deeper recession, things became just desperate in our school situations. Who would have ever thought that all the international schools 10 classes well over 200 days a year, and we're thinking of cutting, and many districts have gone down to 170 days, 175 days, which is just shameful when you think about it, and programs slash the music, the arts, all the things that research clearly shows us are what help build a well-rounded young person gone by the wayside. And so budgets were really cut to the bone. Prop 30 was built as this is not going to bring new money to education. I believe that the governor knew that if Prop 30 had not passed, they would have had to take desperate measures, because we know throughout the over 1,000 school districts in the state of California that approximately 200 of those districts would have been in fiscal insolvency, and immediately, where they would not have been able to make their payroll. So Sacramento would have had to have had a plan B very quickly in place, because that's how desperate it would have been had Prop 30 not passed.
So what we're currently witnessing in Denair, that school district's financial troubles and near insolvency status, would be playing out in multiple districts across the state?
Exactly. And Denair, unfortunately, not to birdwalk, but that district, sadly, is just in the eye of a perfect storm for negativity surrounding a school district budget, because you know, they were always trying to be optimistic in their projections of enrollment. Well, enrollment has declined. The state budget has given them less money, and they've lost a number of students to larger districts. And so that all just swirled together and just came upon them at once, which is really sad. Now, the passage of Prop 30, although we are not experiencing further cuts, it means no new money is going to be coming in. You've read perhaps that some districts are reinstating some furlough days because districts had set aside some money to accommodate for these trigger cuts which would have taken place. So that money was available, and where'd they get that money from? Well, they had set aside that money anticipating the trigger cuts would engage, and they didn't. So the districts had some money to backfill and to get some of those furlough days back. Now, there is a glimmer of hope, because our business genius, Don Gaddy, recently attended meetings in Sacramento, and he's hearing word that when the governor comes out with his budget for the next year in January, that it's going to be optimistic, that actually there will be no cuts projected. In fact, there might be some revenues coming to education. You know, it would be 5 years since we've seen anything besides cuts. And to have an idea of even flat funding, where we're not going to, have to make more cuts, but where we actually had some revenue coming in, is a joyful thought. I'm holding my breath cautiously on that.
So these chronic budget shortfalls and consecutive annual cuts coincided with the global financial crisis of 2008.
That's when it all started. And see, the county office oversees all the district budgets. In other words, they have to be approved through our county office before we submit them to the state. And it was getting to the point where, we had a number of districts in our own county that were getting on the point where they were going to struggle. So we're very grateful that they're not going to have to do that, and hopefully we're going to get some new revenues based on the Prop 30 tax increase, and we'll be able to try to get normalcy back together in our education programs.
This next question is not specific to Stanislaus County, but rather addresses the field of teaching within the entire state of California. There have been several recent stories about a dearth of qualified teachers within the state. On September 11th of this year, Sharon Bernstein of NBC News Los Angeles produced a report entitled "Teacher Shortage Looms for California." In that piece, we read, quote, "California is facing a shortage of qualified teachers and principals for its public schools. Fewer aspiring teachers are enrolling in credentialing programs. Those who seek to teach face a working life that is underpaid, unstable, and in the case of would-be administrators, highly political." Another more recent article, printed in the December 8th edition of the Sacramento Bee, states, "Teacher credentialing programs are losing enrollment. At California State University, which trains half of the state's teachers, the drop-off has been huge, from more than 31,000 enrolled in 2002 to 2003 to just 11,000 in 2010 to 2011. So I can confidently say that many college students planning to become teachers will listen to this broadcast and want to know about future regional job prospects. Can you speak to them about the likelihood of future employment in Stanislaus County? Of course, we're not asking about specific job openings within particular districts, but rather are curious to know what you've generally heard from principals and other district administrators. Do you sense a basic demand for young, freshly credentialed teachers within the county?
Well, there will always be a demand for enthusiastic, motivated teachers, regardless of their age necessarily, but especially young people that are in the credential program right now. I encourage them to stay focused and stay with it. I go and speak to a number of different programs that have young people in the teaching credential programs, and I tell them that there's really two types of individuals that go into the credential program. Those that have a heart for teaching, that have that calling. This is what I want to do. I've known this since I was in the 6th grade when I wanted to be just like my teacher. And then there are those that say, I want to go into teaching because it looks like a fun job. And they go through the steps, and then they are the ones that have to actually experience a classroom before they decide whether or not this is actually meant for them or not. Everyone that enters the field of education knows that, it's not a profession where you're going to make a lot of money, but there are other meaningful ways to make a person happy by being in the profession. We are seeing right now the baby boomer generation is starting to retire out. Many teachers recognize that rather than wait maybe 1 or 2 more years, they're going to be leaving in the next year or two. A lot of districts are offering teachers at the other end of the scale what they call a golden handshake. So they have a little incentive for them to retire so that then the district then can turn around and hire a new teacher, because a new teacher is a lot less in cost than a veteran teacher for them. So from that perspective, we are seeing the county office a high number of new teachers that have come into the profession just recently. And I have 2 examples. Our son, who, played ball for a few years, and then he came and got into the credential program. He got a teaching job right after he got his credential, and now he's in his 2nd year as a 5th grade teacher. And our daughter, who experienced other jobs in her life but was never really fulfilled and never really felt a sense of purpose with what she was doing, even though she seemingly was quite financially doing fine, is just going back to school and getting her credential right now at a later age. She's doing that because she talked to her brother and he tells her what great purpose it brings him, and so she's doing that. We operate what they call a BITSA program through the county office, and that is a beginning teacher support group. And so all teachers that are in the BITSA program, they're required to go into that program once they get a job. And it gives them support, because research has shown that almost 50% of the teachers nationwide leave the profession within the first 3 or 4 years, because it's like, whoa, this isn't the rodeo I signed up for, because it's challenging. It's a lot of work, it's stressful, and there's not a lot of monetary value to that. So the BITSA program in California is designed to help support those teachers and bring them together and talk about the issues that they're dealing with. And right now, I checked with our person that runs our BITSA program. She has over 250 teachers in BITSA. So those are 1st or 2nd year brand new teachers in our county, our region. So that bodes really well. That means that we've hired in the last few years a lot of new teachers in our region, and that's good, because new teachers are the lifeblood. Those are the ones that have the enthusiasm. I always tell people that I'll take an enthusiastic person any day, because you can train enthusiasm, as opposed to hiring somebody that's kind of maybe says, we have another new mandate coming on, what's this about? New teachers are like, bring it on, let's go. So I'm encouraged by those that are in credentialing programs to stay the course, and when you get out, then make applications locally. And then what sometimes I'll tell people that they say, gee, I'm not getting the job, I get an interview, but I'm not getting the job. Well, then you have to, are you willing to move? Because there's jobs that are available. Try charter schools. There's a little more turnover sometimes in charter schools, and so get your foot in the door, do a great job, show that you love what you do, and then things will happen.
As an extension of that previous question, I'd like to present a hypothetical situation to you. If newly credentialed teachers in our county are not able to immediately secure full-time employment, And this could be due to a variety of reasons beyond the control of applicants, such as another severe downturn in the national economy, which places a freeze on all public education hiring. What does Mr. Tom Changnon recommend be done by these underemployed or unemployed graduated teachers? There are many different options and strategies. Teach America programs, there's volunteerism through existing after-school programs, there's substitute teaching work, they could opt to continue their formal training and pursue a master's degree. But what do you personally suggest be done to help improve their chances of future employment locally? What would yield the greatest return on their time and effort investment?
Well, one of the best ways to get your name in other school districts is to substitute. I've had some friends that were waiting for job openings to occur, and they were substituting in just one district, and they were waiting for a job to come open in that one district. And I tell them, you need to put your name on the county sub list so that you can take a substitute job in Patterson, you can take a job in Oakdale, Knights Ferry, all over the county, because the more people that see you or hear about you, obviously when those jobs become available, then teachers are going to talk to the administrator and say, oh, they covered my class while I was out for a week and they did a fantastic job. They would be great for our team at this school. And that's the number one thing, is to get your name out there and to substitute in many different schools and districts and to be as efficient and effective as you can. Get to know the staff and meet with them. Our son, he actually got his credential in February and substituted all that spring. And make sure you eat in the staff lounge, talk to the teachers, get to know the school secretary, very important, and just present yourself that you want to be part of that school's team, and you'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. That would be the best thing. If it's at a high school level, oftentimes coaches are at a premium. And if someone volunteered as an assistant coach, just a walk-on, they call them walk-ons. But to do that at a high school, that tells the head coach, wow, this person wants to be here. It gets them to know other coaches, other teachers, and things happen. I've known a number of people that have served as walk-on coaches that have actually ended up being hired as a coach and then hired on the staff.
And so again, we're reminded that there is no substitute to grassroots networking or face-to-face interactions.
No, you can't beat persistence.
The next question deals with educational policy and employability. Germany has proven itself to be one of the strongest countries in the world economically. Although not immune to the global financial crisis of 2008, they remain a strong exporting nation and are primarily responsible for the continued existence of the EU. That country's repeated bailouts have assisted ailing, debt-heavy Southern European nations from total national default and consequential expulsion from the EU. In stark contrast to the American educational model, 2/3 of all German high schoolers choose vocational over academic education. They have an extensive national internship and apprenticeship program that allows high schoolers to learn a trade while earning a modest wage. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I brought in a couple books for our listeners to hear me talk about, but one of them is called The Coming Jobs War, and it's by Jim Clifton. And Jim Clifton is the CEO of the Gallup poll, and he wrote this book recently. And then there's another one that's called Catching Up or Leading the Way by Yong Zhao. And the reason I mentioned this Yong Zhao's book is he was educated in China, came to America, and he said that we are so caught up in testing. He said, we're trying to emulate the Chinese system of education, of just all strictly using left brain analytical and not the creative side of the brain. And we're trying to be like China. And he said China is trying to be like America because they're so frustrated because they don't have the Steve Jobs of the world. because they're just so analytical in everything they do. And he was saying that, are we catching up with China, or are we trying to lead the way? He said China has the system that America wants, because we used to encourage young people to be independent thinkers. And he said this testing madness that we're caught up in right now, and accountability, has really boxed young people into just doing enough to pass the test.
That's an interesting dynamic. He explains how each country, the U.S. having the number one economy, and then China having the second largest economy in the world, look at each other and yearn for the educational strengths of their competitor. My experiences from teaching in Japan confirm the perspective presented in this book, in that they've adopted a traditionally Confucian model of education where an authoritative instructor dictates from the front of class, and students are expected to excel at rote memorization and exemplify absolute intellectual obedience. In contrast, Western educational culture is derived from the Socratic method, which emphasizes independent thought, creative innovation, and even collaboration among students to help them develop conclusions and solve problems on their own. A normal part of any classroom in America today sees teachers presenting a problem to their classes and then permitting students to confer with one another, to discuss in groups, to freely explore the issue as they develop solutions.
Yes. Young said that you'll see billboards that says China is looking for black-collar workers. And they refer to black-collar, that's Steve Jobs. Because whenever they would see pictures of him with Apple, he always had that black turtleneck. And they don't have the entrepreneurs. And America still, in spite of our system, produces entrepreneurs because of our heritage and our culture of thinking outside the box. We have to protect that. Our system needs to change. We recognize that the paradigm shift that we've had for the last 10 years of this college for all is not working, because in our county, for example, we have not quite 25% of our high school graduates go on to a college. And so then you ask yourself, well, how are we preparing those 75% students for life? We are not doing an effective job of preparing them for life. And that's where a lot of these young people, when they're in high school and they're taking all of these A to G college prep classes, they're checking out. And that's why we have such a huge dropout problem in not just our county and state and country. It's because young people, they don't see a future for them in college. And so I'm a firm believer in students making the choice. And an example of this is in Finland. And the reason I can talk to that is I just have been studying their country's education system. They just completed a 25-year reform movement in education. So it's morphed over a generation almost. But they have really found themselves, they're near the top international test scores. They're a country that's small, the size of Minnesota, and yet when people say, well, what are their socio-demographics? It certainly can't be like California. Well, it is. They have over 40 languages spoken in that small country, but they do a number of things different than we do in America that are getting results. How can you explain that they're the number one country in the world in research and development, and yet they're a small country, but they are producing students to become entrepreneurs, to think and to reason and to collaborate. And our mantra of the last 10 years of, hey, everybody just, I don't care how you get there, but just get to college, because everybody, to be successful in American values, you had to have a college degree. Otherwise, you weren't going to be successful. And we know that's not true, but we bought into that. And now we're beginning to get away from it. But in Finland, for example, children aren't allowed to start school until the age of 7. Because they want them to be able to socialize and play and develop the frontal lobe of the brain, which is the part that is the creative part. And in America here, we have discussions about, preschool and standards for young people that are 4 years old. We're cramming so much on them at an early age that we're taking away the creative expression part of young people, and it's really been damaging. And in Finland, what they do is students, and similar to a lot of European countries, when they reach an age of 14 is pretty much the average, then they take an assessment test on, basically, it's not an exam of knowledge, but an exam of interest. What are your interests? And they take this survey, and then if it shows that they have an aptitude for college, then they go on to college. And if it's more into the vocational end, then they go into that track. But the students are choosing that themselves. In Finland, you never hear of a student dropping out because they're choosing what they want to do. And unfortunately, we're not allowing that here. We're forcing students to have this mindset that if you don't go to college, you're a loser. And that's wrong. And we've branded a lot of young people that are very intelligent into that mindset. And when you think about the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs of the world, they're not college graduates, but they're entrepreneurs. And they think, and they know how to work with people. So what we need to do is really look at our system and evaluate what's best to help young people succeed in life, not just get there to be on your way to college. And there's a movie out that was put out just a few years ago, and it was called Waiting for Superman. You might have heard of that, but it was a lot of it talked about inadequacies of the schools, and it blamed schools for a lot. But some of it showed there's two movies that came out simultaneously. The other one is called Race to Nowhere. But both of these movies showed the tremendous pressure young high school students are on that want to go to college and want to go to a nice college, but the competition and the sheer amount of pressure that they're under, to me, it's chaotic in their life. And so we need to get back to just saying, okay, what's your interest? This is what, if you want to do this, then this is the level of education that you need to attain to get there. And then they'll do it on their own. They'll do it on their own. So I'm a big fan of Finland. The video is called The Finland Phenomena, and it was done by a group from Harvard University that went over and studied their school system for about 6 weeks, and they put together this documentary. I've shared it with a lot of people in our county to get the conversation going. And now at least California and the country is more, you hear the word career or college ready, and I like that. So at least they're acknowledging that we need to prepare students for a career, and that may include college or it may not.
There has been anxiety expressed by local instructors about the newly created educational national standards that are being implemented in school districts across the country. The Common Core, as it's called, stresses the preparation of students for the real world, and that means making sure that roughly 70% of all assigned reading is nonfictional. Some fear classics like The Catcher in the Rye, Huck Finn, and To Kill a Mockingbird would be replaced by more instructional and technical material. I've read that the Common Core is a set of centrally planned educational norms out of Washington, D.C. that will replace the 50 different state-developed standards. The intention is to reduce disparities in educational performance between the states. Can you say something about this?
Yes. Now, we've had standards for a dozen years. Each state was allowed to develop their own standards. California took the high road years ago and made our standards very rigorous. But the inequality of state to state is crazy. So when California is often compared to other states on how many students, what percentage we have that are proficient or above average, we are very low in that regard. But it's because other states don't have the rigorous standards that California does. And we see it when we get families that move to California and they enroll their children in our schools, and then the parents come in and complain and say, well, my child took a test that says that they're just average, and in Georgia they were proficient, highly proficient. Well, that's because at their level that's what they were, but this is our level. So a few years ago, the governors and the heads of education, for example, like in our state, the state superintendent of schools, got together and started this discussion of Common Core standards for English language arts and math to begin. And so it seems like there were almost 50 different entities that worked on this, and I don't want to call it a grassroots level, because if you talk to any teachers around here, they'll say, well, I wasn't asked to participate or give any input, and that's probably true. But there were hundreds and thousands of people that were asked and given input on developing the Common Core. And I really think it's going to be great. And I think that once people understand the purpose, then they will get behind it more as well. There's a little pushback from your English and language arts people because they're fearful that Huck Finn is going to be taken off the shelf. That's not the case. What we're trying to incorporate standards and opportunities for students to experience real-life problem solving so that they're getting accustomed to making decisions instead of taking multiple choice tests or writing their opinion about something. It's no longer about writing an opinion. It's more about expressing your view about, is this right or is this right, and why? And it's just getting them to be more critical thinking so that they can go out and be more marketable in the job market. Because as Jim Clifton explains in his book, they've done a world poll for the last 4 years, not just the Gallup American poll, world poll. And every year for the last 6 years, the number one concern that people have worldwide, it's not terrorism, it's not health care, it's not the economy, it's jobs. That's the number one concern in the world by people. They want their child to have a job. And a good job, by world standards, is 30 hours a week, steady. 30 hours a week is a good job. There's a tremendous fear worldwide about jobs. And so, therefore, we need to prepare our young people so that they can compete for those jobs. And so we can't do it teaching the standards that we have right now, because we're teaching kids more to just rote from memory and respond to test questions instead of learn how to collaborate in groups, work together as a team, and develop plans and have outcomes that are relevant and real so that business people can say, these are my needs, and I know this student has graduated and he will fit my needs. He'll have those skills. It's more about teaching skill sets for young people so that they will be marketable, because that's what it's about. I recently was in Los Angeles for a seminar, and at the hotel there were a couple hundred Japanese students, all really nicely dressed. And I said, oh, you're here on summer break or vacation? And they said, vacation? I said, we're always in school, 230 days. And I said, oh, you're here then to see Disneyland and all that. And I said, our number one priority for coming to America is to look for job opportunities.
I can corroborate the claims made by that Japanese student you spoke with while in Los Angeles. Japanese students report to their schools daily through their summer break, if only for club or sporting activities. And then they also attend what's called juku, a form of night school held 4 to 5 nights a week, with each individual meeting stretching roughly 2 to 3 hours. All this is done in addition to normal school day responsibilities and obligations.
Yes, they're hungry because they want a better life for themselves. And they see America as that opportunity. We are still the land of opportunity. But only the strong will survive in the 21st century. And when I go out and I talk to high school students and I talk to parent groups, there are people from around the world that want jobs in America. And we have to prepare our students for those jobs, or they're not going to get them. And we don't want our 25-year-old students taking orders at McDonald's for the next 10 years. But if we don't have skills and teach them skills, we're going to have that. Now, my sister, an example, she lives and works over in Lafayette. It's a nice, affluent area. And the big news over there, they're going to build an In-N-Out burger. So the story in the paper I hear, they had 510 applications. 510 applications, and 400, 80% of those that applied had college degrees. They had college degrees, but they had no skills. So we need to get young people focused. What are you good at? And what are you passionate about? And go for it. That's what we need to do.
I'm going to bring up a piece of international news only because this concept is slowly gaining support here in the United States. Just 2 months ago, the French president, François Hollande, I hope I pronounced that correctly, announced his plans to get rid of homework as part of his educational reforms. The rationale behind this plan of elimination is linked to issues of inequality. It's said that not all students have positive or supportive home environments that are conducive to homework completion. In an effort to level the playing field, homework would simply be removed as an instructional tool. Your thoughts?
I'm not a fan of homework myself. However, I wouldn't eliminate homework to level the field because we're watering down instead of trying to bring things up. There are schools in our county that have eliminated homework. One school comes to mind called Great Valley Academy, and they've eliminated homework for the purpose of hoping that young people are inspired during the day in their studies, that they want to go home and pursue further studies of that subject. So if you talk to most young people in elementary school and middle school and ask them, do they enjoy doing homework, then the answer unanimously is going to say, I hate homework. And sadly, it's boring. It's just rote work. It's doing spelling words.
And where exactly is Great Valley Academy?
It's a charter school in Modesto. It hasn't been open that long, but they're doing some really outside-the-box things and having tremendous success with it. So I see it as a future model for our school system. Maybe the change that's coming and the new paradigm for our system is that others will follow like Great Valley Academy, and students will be inspired during the day because they're working on projects or they're working on things that are meaningful to them, that they'll go home and engage their parents. They'll be excited about what they worked on at school, and they'll carry that at home. And we're seeing that at this school. And our crazy busy worlds that we live in right now with families, sometimes maybe it's better that families just would sit and talk and have conversation as a family instead of a student at the kitchen table just burning a pencil out doing rote work.
Interesting. My knee-jerk reaction to the idea of eliminating homework from the educational process is not positive. But if the schools are encountering promising results, if the students are showing initiative and their academic performance is improving, obviously this empirical data can't be ignored.
Yes, and that's not to say on occasion you would have an assignment review for an exam or things like that. You're always going to have that. But just to say, do page 25 in your math book and do the first 50 problems when a student has in class demonstrated mastery already, then why are they doing more of the same for just busy work?
So I'm going to ask a lighter question. If, for whatever reason, you decide to leave the Central Valley, where would your first choice for relocation be and why?
Well, being a country boy from Idaho and growing up on the Snake River, I grew up about 30 miles from the Grand Tetons in Wyoming and Yellowstone Park, and we used to call it God's country because it was just so beautiful. I would tend to go back to that kind of an environment, or Colorado. I'm an avid snow skier, and so the winters and the mountains, they beckon me. So if I would to relocate, then I'd head to the mountains somewhere, and it would either be back to Idaho or Colorado.
Would your choice be different if you were 30 years younger? So today's world, today's economy, but Mr. Changnon, less 30 years.
Oh, I would stay right where I am. To me, education is the noblest of all professions because at some point, just about every human being has to give credit to a teacher for putting them in the position that they're in, or to help inspire them, or to encourage them in some way. And it's very gratifying to know along the way of my career that in some way maybe I have assisted a person to be a better human being as well. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I've enjoyed every stop along my education journey. From coaching, I still would love to go back to coaching someday, and the classroom was always enjoyable. And where I am now, I'm hopefully having a wider scope of an impact with people, but I continue to stay enthusiastic about education. We have to be relentless in our optimism that things are going to get better. And people are quick to be negative about education, our system, and our schools, but we're doing fantastic things. I could take you on any given day and show you amazing things that are happening in the classrooms across Stanislaus County and our dedicated professionals that are in the field. So I can't speak highly enough about them and about how proud I am to represent them in this position I'm in.
And in my mind, in my head, this is where we all came from. The dreams we have, the love we share. This is what we're...
Very good, sir. And on behalf of the Stanislaus Tutoring and Mentoring Program, I thank you again for taking the time to meet with us and to share this valuable information with our local educational community. I'm confident that the insight you provided today will be put to good use by aspiring teachers.
Hey, my pleasure. I'm glad that we were able to make this happen, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.